Hi there, and welcome back to LeWeb live from Paris. I'm Mark Davis, and for the third Hangout of the day, I'm joined by the Senior Vice President of Yahoo, the man in charge of Yahoo's communications products, so mail, messenger, groups, contacts. Jeff Bonforte, thank you very much for joining us here.
Sure, my pleasure.
And on screen, we are joined by, now, we've got, is that Michelle? Michelle, I remember you from last year. You still in Tallahassee? I can't hear you, Michelle. Is your mic on?
Yes, I am in Tallahassee. Good to see you.
Is the mic on? Okay,
Yeah.
I just got her, yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you, Michelle, but it's nothing to do with you. Don't worry. It's a problem in the earpiece.
Okay, all right.
And also by Michael.
Yep, Michael from Kyiv, Ukraine.
Same. I can't hear you, Michael, but if Jeff can,
I can
then
hear him.
that's-
Yep.
Okay,
sure.
that's half the battle won anyway. And also, if you're following this on Google Plus, I just remind you that by using the hashtag LeWeb Hangout, if you have any questions you want to ask to Jeff, then go ahead. You've also got the Q&A app inside Google Plus as well. And if you'd like to take part in any of these Hangouts, then you go to euronews.com, the homepage, and follow the signs for LeWeb and just register. There'll be a schedule for you there. Now, Jeff, you just come out of a discussion, the title of which was Wild Rides. Now, one of the interesting points to come out of it was that you revealed that had it not been for your car running out of petrol, you wouldn't have sold Zobni to Yahoo.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, battery in this case.
Oh, battery, sorry.
Yeah. We were talking about luck and the role luck plays in some of the successes, especially in tech, I think, where there's a lot of potential energy in tech companies, but the actual ability to sort of convert on it, it's surprising how much of my career, I've been doing 20 years in startups now almost, and how much I can point to some of the real sort of big changes that happen in my startups has been very lucky, you know, sitting to the person by accident on a flight back and striking up a conversation, or my car running out of battery and deciding to spend the time while it's charging up, eating lunch at Yahoo, and running into some people, and we struck a deal, I think, within 48 hours of that conversation. So, well, we were also talking about how much goes into sort of preparing and making sure that, you know, there's fertile place for there to be luck. But yeah, that was the discussion.
You said you in an acquisition, if you're selling your company, that you're only really in control of 25% of the process, and to a large extent, you make your own luck. I can't remember which golfer said that the more he practices, the luckier he gets.
Yeah, the luckier he gets. I would say that I think what entrepreneurs do is they simply underestimate how much of the risk profile or how much risk for their startup or for their idea they just simply have no control over. And the more you come to terms with that, the more you learn how to deal with risk. Someone once told me, when you're CEO, you're the chief risk officer. And it struck me as funny at first because I thought, well, we're all about risk. You know, startups, risk, how amazing risk is. And they said, yeah, you have so much risk. So your job is to reduce as many places as risk as you can possibly do it. So hiring the right team, getting the right set of investors if you can find investors, making sure you don't run out of money. Peter Pham said something that I often tell entrepreneurs, the only thing that kills a startup is running out of money. And then underestimating how long everything takes. It just simply takes so much longer than entrepreneurs give themselves time for, and they just run out of money before they have a chance to get there.
You also mentioned about time, it being a precious commodity as well. You're often, the longer things take, the less likely it is to succeed.
Yeah, you know, I learned, I had this really, Vinod Khosla, who's a great investor at Khosla Ventures. He said, you engineer your startup for failure. So everything about the mechanics of how you do it, your team, the way you instrument your product, the way you build the product, the technology that's driving it, those should all be optimized around the assumption that what you're working on will fail, but you learn as quickly from that failure and you get going and you make changes as quickly as possible. So it would drive him crazy if I got in and he said, what have you done in the last 90 days? And I said, oh, we launched a product and it's not going as well as we wanted it to. And he said, well, why haven't you launched 5 products? in the 90 days. And I think Kevin Rose had said that he could do as little as 3 to 5 days, sometimes 5 to 6 weeks to launch a product. So it's not that every product has to be launched so quickly. Some products take years to work on, but what you want to do is reduce the cycle of idea to how it works and how well it'll work. And it's not just, can we move fast, can we work hard, can we spend late nights? It's, are the systems set up, are the computer programs that you write, are the dashboards that you view, are they set up to learn as quickly as possible so that you can simply learn the lesson faster? The example that Vinod gave me was, he said when Thomas Edison figured out how to do a light bulb, he just simply had to test 1,000 metals to get there. Had he spent his entire time figuring out how to test metals as quickly as possible, he would have gotten there much faster than one metal. Next day, try another metal. He'd built a tooling system that would allow him to test 100 metals a day. He'd gotten there in 10 days.
So we take the products that are under your remit at Yahoo. Do they all have to evolve together, or can you make them evolve separately?
Yeah, we've been having this discussion a lot. So a lot of what Yahoo did in its first stage of its life, in its early Web 1.0 days, things tended to evolve together. As mail got bigger, homepage got bigger. As homepage got bigger, the search engine would grow. We see a lot of our products on totally different growth cycles today, and it's important even within my product set, Messenger, Mail, Groups, Calendar, Contacts, they all seem to have their own inertia, their own energy. The more I bind them together, actually, the harder it is for our consumers to sort of decide, I like this mail product, I like this messaging product. So again, what I spend most of my time is building really strong platforms so I can keep the big products going ahead and making progress, but I can learn by running many more experiments. When you're in a big company, let's say I want to build new messaging products. In startups, it seems like every week there's 100 new messaging products in the App Store. If Yahoo wants to have a breakthrough, a lot of these are just luck, getting the right product, and you can't predict what's going to be the next product. So if we're only able to run one experiment a year, we're at a great disadvantage.
Okay. Well, let's go to Tallahassee.
Okay.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, can you hear me
Michelle.
now? Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for just, inspiring us today as an entrepreneur. It spoke a lot to me, so I appreciate that. I want to ask you a question as it relates to the next generation of creators, of thinkers. I work with a lot of students in journalism and media in general. What would kind of be your words of wisdom to them right now as far as kind of staying on the front end of what's happening in online communication? What types of things should they be doing to prepare for what's ahead?
It's a difficult question. I think that I talked to a guy that had, he sold his company to Google and now he's working in education, earlier phases like kindergarten. But he said something that really inspired me. He said, initially, we worked really hard in order to solve a problem. This was like the big problem, which was we figure out how to solve, we taught problem solving skills. But today's students, with the ubiquity of data, we can find the answers to so many questions so easily. And he said, it's not how to solve a problem. That's actually pretty easy nowadays. It's what problem to solve. So you only get to spend so much of your time in your life. And when you're young, time doesn't seem so precious. When you get older, you start counting how many more startup ideas you have or how many more ways you can participate in innovation. And what I would say is identifying both what's a good fit for their skill set and identifying which problems are worth solving is probably the hardest. It's easier now to start working in tech and to work in innovation, whether it's on the education side or in healthcare or in consumer apps and mobile phones. It's a lot easier than it's ever been, but it really puts the onus back on what problem are you trying to solve and is it an important enough problem? Because if you're solving a problem and you decide to spend your life working, innovating, it just matters that you're spending your time in something that's valuable for you and it's valuable for society. If that's true, you do a good job, you work hard, you're scrappy and innovative and a little bit lucky, things generally come together. But when I was first starting my career, I wasn't clear that I could be an entrepreneur for my entire career. That could be my career, that I could actually work in startups my whole life. It's now very clear that if I were 25 again or 23, I could spend my entire career in tech. There's enough going on that you could fail many startups and still keep working and going at it. So when I look for people that are wanting to become entrepreneurs, I really look for true passion, people that aren't there because they think they're going to get rich quick or get lucky, but because they're passionate about it, that speaks to something that they're very interested in. So I think it's channeling their energy of their own interests and then being persistent. It's very lonely. being on sort of the edge of innovation. You feel stupid a lot of times. You feel on your own, and people tell you no all day long. You feel really unpopular, and it's every good idea you have, somebody else has the same idea a week earlier. So it's just really having the resolve to keep going and to evolve. And I think the hardest part for me when I was young was being a good listener. I was so sure of the things in my head that it was really hard for me to take advice and to learn from that. So it's difficult to do because everyone has advice, but it sort of helps sharpen your brain, and as you get new information, you become a better student. That's that learning to fail, learning to learn quickly is a lot about, if you can take these ideas and this input you're getting from me or from Peter or Loic or whomever, Tony, who was on before us, it'll dramatically improve your chances of being successful, just being able to digest this. But it's hard. You're so insecure as an entrepreneur. You really feel so vulnerable all the time, and you have to channel that insecurity and really turn it into a self-awareness. And through that self-awareness, you become, I think, incredibly good at being on that cutting edge of innovation. So, it's a real process, and it's not something that comes easily. Some people get lucky. Their first startup, they do Facebook. Some people, it's their 7th or 8th startup or 9th or 10th. And in the end, you may not have a big success, but you may have a great career. You may do some important parts of innovation. So,
awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Would you say that with age comes experience, and but also with age comes a certain tendency to maybe not look outside the box and to stay settled in your ways? Would it be more difficult to work in that environment as you grow older?
Yeah, I worry about this all the time, because all the lessons I've learned I take as truth. But the only way to truly innovate is to break a rule. So you can't break every rule, but you can break, there has to be something that we accept, society accepts as a truth. All cars will take gasoline. And then you say, I'm going to do an electric car. That you're breaking a rule, and everyone will tell you you can't do it. You can't do it because of the batteries, you can't do it because of the chart. There's something why you can't do it. So you have to break a rule in the process, and that's the lonely part. If you did everything according to the rules, you're a big company, and you'll get you'll get beat up by the large established players. But to beat and to really innovate, you have to take something that society accepts as true, and everyone around you accepts as true, and you have to tell them that they're wrong, and you have to believe it. And the older you get, the more you accept things as true, and it's harder for you to break the own rules that you say, I've learned this, I learned this rule myself, I failed, I learned that I should never do this again, and it's that thing I really should do again. That someone who's younger than I am, who hasn't learned the lesson, will push on something that I think is unwise. That's why you have to be careful about the advice you take. Because an entrepreneur will come and ask me, and I'll say, oh, don't do that, it'll never work. But, if I were right, it wouldn't be hard to do.
But then with regards to education, kids in school, teachers don't like them breaking rules.
When I spent 2 years in Switzerland, and I was so amazed at how amazing the education system was there. And I talked to Swiss a lot, and I said, boy, I'd really love to bring my kids up in Switzerland. And they said, then you'd have Swiss children. And they meant it as like, our kids are great, but they don't do what you do. We don't allow them to break these rules. We really sort of beat it into them that you're not supposed to break the rules, that you're not supposed to fail. And for various reasons, good and bad, that's important to Swiss society, for the stability. In the States, there's a little bit less net that's underneath us when we're walking across, and you're allowed to break a few more rules a little bit more often. But I do worry that as we keep going forward, that the more data that's available, the more the information that's available to you, the less likely you are to think, why is it, do you just accept what you read, or do you question, why is it this way? So when I'm between ventures, it's really, I spend all this time trying to get back in touch with asking questions. Why is this like this? Why is it so terrible to do this? Why is it so painful to buy this way, or to travel this way, or to try to hire people this way? It's asking all those questions, and then when you ask these very fundamental questions and you keep kind of get behind the questions of why we're where we are today with something that's not optimal, not great, that's where you find that inspiration. It can be something simple like Uber. Why is it such a pain in the ass to get from A to B? Why can't I just hit a button and have a car pick me up reliably?
Okay, well, that relates to a question I wanted to ask you about the difference between the US and Europe. But first, I'd like to give the opportunity to Michael to ask a question.
Yeah, hi Jeff.
Hi, Michael.
It was nice. It's very interesting listening to you. I got actually two questions. Like one of them is about more like your personal recommendation career. Right now, I teach lots of young startuppers, and you, as being able to work in big corporation and your own ventures, what would you recommend to young startuppers? Should they go and work for some period of time in other startup or corporation, and then start? Or maybe they would just go start fresh, green, their business. But from my experience, they got like less chance to succeed if they have no actual experience of working within the company, with a group of people, with managing group of people. So what would you think? What would be the best career path for them?
I think it's a good point. So there's no correct answer. Some people really do well on their own. You know, I did my first few startups before I ever worked for a big company, though I did consult for a little bit out of college to big companies, so I understood a little bit more about how big companies worked. But you build such an amazing network of really talented. I think there's a big misconception that startups are full of smart people and big companies are full of dumb people. It's just not true. My first time I worked at Yahoo, my intuition was, well, I'm from a small company, so I'm going to be smarter than everyone. And I get there and I meet the guy that invented PHP, the guy that had worked on early Java. You know, I was meeting the most amazing, most talented people. And at one point, the co-founder Jerry Yang came to me and said, "How do we make Yahoo more entrepreneurial?" And I said, "I think the more amazing thing is how did we make such entrepreneurial people turn out such mediocre, non-entrepreneurial products? Like we've done something here." We've taken this big company, we've taken these, I could do 100 startups with that group that I was with in 2005 at Yahoo. So I think an amazing thing about a big company is you just meet an amazing network of people that you can help grow your team, and that's one of the biggest challenges is how do you convince people to come work with you when you do a startup. So if for only networking, Michael, I think that working at a big company is very valuable. I think it's a little bit of a lure though, because you'll get a good salary, you'll get good benefits, it gets very comfortable quickly. And, in that case, you're lucky to get laid off, to shock the system and cause you to change the way you're doing it. And so I do think that people that have the inclination to do something in the startup world, if they work for a big company, they often just simply spend too long at that big company and not going out and giving it a try. So I think the answer differs, but in general, I would say that it certainly doesn't hurt to work in a big company and build out that network and learn all about some things at scale. But don't stay there too long.
But how does that work at Yahoo? Like a company the size of Yahoo, it's a huge structure. It has structure. It has a hierarchy. It has rules. How does Yahoo kind of feed the idea of entrepreneurship?
It's difficult because at a big company we have hundreds of millions of customers on mail, and if you think too entrepreneurial, you're too risk-loving, an outage, right? An outage is really painful for. Even a small outage in mail is a couple million people will be without access to their mail or have slow access to mail. So you want to fail fast. You want to make sure that you're not being too safe because you want to push ahead on things and innovate. So there are parts of Yahoo that were incredibly entrepreneurial, were incredibly innovative. We're small teams working on really cutting edge ideas. There are other parts of Yahoo where we do move more slowly. We make incredible progress. When you have 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 million customers on a product, you add a feature and it adds 4 or 5% engagement. I'll do more in mail in a month than sometimes I'll do for years in a career in terms of the number of customers I engage and the amount of behavior I change and the revenue I can generate. So big companies come with their own sets of rewards. It's really amazing how much you can do. It's kind of like driving a big tanker across the ocean, how much oil or how much goods you can take from Asia to the United States, and a big company operates like that. A small startup is more like a little speedboat, but if you're trying to move cars from China to the United States, a speedboat's not much help. That said, we also are competing with startups and big companies and great innovation at Yahoo, and so we have groups set up that way. They're small groups. The one thing we do at a big company that's different than small companies is our focus on platforms. A platform is a way of reducing risk for the big companies. So if, say, for example, we want to work on email, we have all the attachments. It's a lot of storage. We're managing files. Let's say we want to do a startup that does with photos. Having that strong fundamental platform that can deal with attachments makes it so it's very fast for us to innovate on a photo app. Or with weather, we had Flickr, and that's a really nice, powerful app and platform in Flickr that we could use to innovate on top of. So in a big company, we get to use these really big fundamental platforms in storage and Hadoop and processing power and networking capabilities that allow us to innovate with a small team, 5 or 6 people or 2 or 3 people can do a lot. And to foster the most innovation really at a big company, I spend the most time is refocusing on the basic platforms. So making sure those platforms are rock solid allows us to move very quickly, fail without much cost.
Well, we haven't got all the time in the world, so I would like to give Michel and Michael the chance to ask any questions that they might still have. Michael,
I still got like one question. It's about Yahoo and actually aligned with what you just talked. Do you think Yahoo anytime would allow to sign up not using Yahoo email? I mean,
sure, allowing IMAP access.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, we look at this a lot. In the early days of email, it was important to us that we had sort of the back-end control and the front-end control. Smartphones really has changed the world a little bit so that we think about the front-end experience, the client of mail, and the back-end experience is separate. So we do allow some IMAP access and you to bring an account in from that you might have IMAP'd somewhere else into Yahoo Mail. But I think we're increasingly interested in how can we allow people to take email that they have in another service and use it with Yahoo. We did this with Zobni, my company that was acquired. We were able to index any inbox you had. So we've been looking at that, and we have a lot of interesting technology there.
Yeah, I hope we're going to do it soon. Like, I want to start to using it, but it's only with Yahoo email. It's just not...
Yeah. Mail's unique in that way. The lock-in really is, you know, you've got all your stuff there. You've told everyone your address. Messaging's a little different. So, yeah, I agree. There's some things that we'd like to do there.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot.
And back to Tallahassee then. Michelle.
Okay, I just wanted to ask this question. I was on your blog earlier and reading in reference to a quote you said about an article that was written. It just relates to diverse teams making better global products. Can you speak to that a little bit? I know, you know.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good find. So, yeah. Again, when I was young and I was in startup, you surround yourself, and the startup looks like you. You know, it's like you're young guys. You all went to college in the same place, and there's 5 or 6 or 10 of you, and pretty soon there's not much diversity in the team. And so in some ways you all think the same, and there's some speed and some value in that. The downside is that I went and worked at a company like Yahoo, and my first team at Yahoo was 165 people. And they were from all over. Some people were married, some people were single, some people had PhDs, some people had basic college degrees. I was a classics major, so I was, you know, the oddball that way. All races, all types of languages. They were from all over the world, and I was amazed at how much things that I thought would be a detriment really gave Yahoo the ability to make, because every day the product is getting little decisions from everyone touching it that's participating in building it. So you have, you know, a woman with 4 children who's been working for 20 years who's immigrated from China. You have another guy sitting next to him who's a new college graduate out of Bangalore, India, sitting right next to someone who grew up on the beaches in San Diego, sitting right next to someone who grew up, you know, in snowy part of Canada, and all these diversity. And I was surprised at how much it made the product better. And it really caused me to rethink the basics, because I had spent so much of my life assuming whatever I am is the best and everything else that's different than that is sort of the worst. And when I learned to find out that not only that the diversity challenging ideas, but just how much the diversity of experience and expertise made the product better, Michelle. So I think that it's one thing that I now have to, when I do a startup, is to artificially make sure that we're doing a good job of capturing some diversity early on, because I find the products are just simply better when we have more perspectives at the table.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so I just one last question. I said I'd like to ask you about the difference between what the US and Europe, but also you know, the eastern fringes of Europe, in Ukraine, where Michael is. Would you advise European entrepreneurs in general terms to get their butts over to California?
You know, it's a mixed bag. So one of my investors and a fantastic entrepreneur in Europe, Nicholas Zenstrom, who has done Skype, and then he's now through Atomico, his investment fund, he's doing all sorts of great things. He pointed out that all the billion-dollar companies that are being created, it's a disproportionate number of them are being created outside of California now. So I think we all believe that it's all coming from, the 30 miles around Silicon Valley, but the truth is that's actually not true. And especially if you go down and you look at enterprise software and you look at hardware and you really diversify the tech startups. So it's not necessary for sure. There are many pockets. The trick is it's very difficult when you're doing a startup to find the infrastructure. So what I first tried to do my first startup in Atlanta, Georgia in 1996. And I thought, well, I can do it in Atlanta. There's great universities here, et cetera. The lawyers didn't know what I was talking about. They wouldn't take me on as a customer. I couldn't get office space because the landlords thought I was insane, and they wouldn't give me a lease because I didn't have anything to show for being able to pay the rent. I couldn't get employees to take a chance and leave Coca-Cola and Delta and all the companies in Atlanta. No one wanted to come out of the university and go work for me, so just nothing worked. I couldn't get any of it to work. I got on the plane from Atlanta to San Francisco, and I found an angel investor sitting next to me. I got there, I found a lawyer a day later. I rented office space in 2 days. Like, it was unbelievable how fast and easy everything was because everyone knew what was going on. And so by understanding the risks and how an ecosystem, I used to have, between 2002 and 2008, I probably met with 4 or 5 governors of different states that said, how do we make what California has in Iowa, in Ohio, in these places? And I kept telling them, it's a really weird magical mix of having a lot of investors, having a lot of talent, and having a group of people from the families, the wives, and the husbands of the people that work in startups saying, like, I get it. I understand that the company may fail or that it may be, but we'll be fine. We just keep going. So if you think about the relative risk in the Valley, if my startup fails, they go work at Twitter the next day. If you're working in a market where there aren't that many startups and the thing fails, they go to work for a big company. The big company looks at the resume and says, never heard of this company, this startup. I'm going to take the person from the other big company. So I think it's lower risk to come from California, but there's a lot of noise in the Valley. So I think lots of great ideas come from all over the world, especially in things like messaging. Very little of the innovation in messaging is coming from the Valley. Most of it's coming from China and Taiwan and Korea and Japan. And then we saw WhatsApp, which actually were former Yahoo employees, but they really did it in Europe. It was because the BlackBerry was weak that WhatsApp took off, and it was a European, in fact, it was really because of the European market that WhatsApp took off. So I think all sorts of things with smartphones are making it much more possible. And so it's 50-50. I think if I were an entrepreneur, I would at least spend 2 or 3 months in the Valley to try to know what the difference was between what am I going to get if I do it in the Valley and what's going to be the difference if I started up in Stockholm or Amsterdam or London.
Do you think that the playing field's leveling itself out, or
more every
will
day?
There always be a part of California that?
I think California will always do well. The capital is becoming more available all over. What happens is, let's say the tech market takes a dive, California is going to be a much stronger central market for the next wave of innovation. So you'll scare off all that money that went into tech during the safe period of tech investments. So if you have a startup that you may need to ride, it may take longer than the wave you're given, the window you're given. It's helpful to be in California where there's a certainty. That said, not competing for talent against Google every day also can be great. I mean, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Yahoo, they pay incredible wages. Their stocks are going up. So it's hard. You're doing a startup, you want to offer half as much or even less than that to someone, and they say, I don't know, I can go to Apple, their stock's still growing at 20%, 30% a year. Yeah. So I think there's advantages to being in California. I think there are lots of disadvantages that you would play off. You just play with what you got, and you decide what you have. But you should at least know what trade-offs you're going to make.
Yeah, no, that echoes something that Shehzad Daredia was saying exactly earlier. Listen, thank you very much for joining us here, and thank you also to Michelle and to Michael.
Thanks, guys.
We hopefully we'll see you in another Hangout. We have one more left today, which is at 6:40 Central European Time. I have no idea what time that is in Florida.
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock. And
Yeah,
it'll be plus 2 hours in Ukraine, I guess. So, if you want to join in those Hangouts, euronews.com, and then follow the signs for LeWeb. Jeff Bonforte, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep,
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Michael.
See you, Michael.
See you.